Okay, so this is the second nuclear prediction video. Regrettably, we make these predictions because there's a contest between an Elijah and prophets of Baal in 1 Kings 18, and I'm attempting to... it's the job of the guy who thinks he's decoded the Bible to compete in this contest. And having, in my opinion, decoded the Bible, I therefore have to compete in this contest and make these dire predictions. It is the job of the guy who decodes the Bible at the end, who is the greater Joseph, the greater Daniel, and actually an antitypical Elijah, to compete with the prophets of Baal. It's one of his duties. And that means he has to predict when fire comes from the heavens in the form of a rising mushroom cloud like a man's palm from the sea. I've been trying to do that since I believe I've decoded the Bible. And here is the latest prediction. For a rising mushroom cloud from the sea, which is fire from the heavens. It's a nuclear terrorist attack on Dartford, we think on the Thames, coming from the Thames, which is seawater, at Dartford, we think, or coming from the Hudson, which is seawater in Manhattan. And the date for this, in Hebrew terms, is 2015 Ab 26 to Ab 28. That's not using the modern Israeli Hebrew calendar, it's using the ancient Hebrew calendar of mankind, which has 30 days to the month and 12 months to the year, and 360 biblical lunar calendar days to what is a 365 day year. In Gregorian terms, this the first of these nuclear terrorist attacks should be, if we're right, on August the 13th to 16th. It's this weekend coming, 2015. And the second of them will be August 18th to the 23rd. So it's the week afterwards, basically. And these two attacks are on Britain and America because in Daniel 2 there's a stone cut not by hands which hits the feet of a giant image of a man. And this stone cut not by hands is biblical speak for it's either angelic or demonic. Now it's deliberately in Daniel 2 left ambiguous as to whether cut not by hands mean it wasn't cut by humans, which means it was cut by angels, which means, or demons. Now, in fact, the stone in Daniel 2 hits the feet of the giant image of the man. And then it says, in the days of those kings, blah blah blah, and the stone is mentioned again. And this stone hits the toes, which are of iron and of clay, moist clay, moulded clay. So there are two stones. There's one that hits the toes, and another hits the feet. And the stone that hits the feet is the stumbling block of mankind, which is nuclear terrorism. Because the purpose of all terrorism, in sort of moral, you can't say moral terms, in political terms, is not to kill loads of people. It's to scare the government and society into destroying itself. There's a good example of, I think, a lion outside of a sheep pen, and he roars, and the sheep get so scared they jump out of the pen. That's what terrorism is about. The terrorist can't bring down Britain or America with military might. He doesn't have that might. But he can scare us into destroying ourselves. And that's what we're going to do, pretty much, as a result of this terrorism that's coming. The correct response to terrorism is no response. No response in the sense of we're all holding on desperately to morality and our values and what we are. The terrorist wants us to let go of what we are and put a whole load of new legislation in, draconian powers for the security services, etc., etc. That is not the correct response to a bully. The correct response to a bully is no response. Then he'll stop bullying you. So, anyway, the future is written, if we have this right. So, the reason we think that the attack is on Britain and America is that this giant image of a man is the march of military world powers over God's people. and the preeminent military world power of the last century was the British and then the Americans. But we're a joint world power. Whenever the Americans go to war, the British are with them, and vice versa. It's the coalition. And we are their closest military ally. We're a sort of double act. And so we are the 2 feet. This image of a man, it stands for the military world powers, as I said, over God's people, starting with, I think it's, the head was Babylon at the top, which is a world power, which imprisoned God's people, who were at that time the Jews. Then after Babylon came Medo-Persia, which sacked Babylon. Then came Greece, then Rome, and then there were the Christians. Then there was a period when there was no true people of God, the gap between when Jesus was absent, gap between the presences, and then his people reappeared in the 20th century with the Adventist Church, the true one, which we understand was the Watchtower, and at that time the preeminent military power was the British, and then after the Second World War it became the Americans. So we're still as military power, so we're the 2 feet, and the stone hits these 2 feet, and it stumbles us and causes the world. We lose the 7th world power, which is the Anglo-American world power, loses its power to the 10 toes, who are 10 kings of some kind of reformed Security Council or UN Peacebuilding Commission or something. It's some kind of UN takeover bid with 10 kings who presumably are the governments of 10 countries. So that's why we think it's Britain and America. The reason, and well, there are other reasons too, which I went into in the previous talk. The reason we now think it's this weekend is partly because it wasn't last weekend, but there's loads of other reasons. They're all in Understanding 271 of www.truebible.co.com. But one of the simplest is that the Harvest Festival, the festival of the final ingathering, the festival of booths, ended on Tishri 21. And we know from various scriptures that, well, you can work it out actually from 1 Kings 18, because there are 450 prophets of Baal. And after the fire sign, Elijah says to the people watching the contest, seize the prophets of Baal, do not let a man of them escape. Now in this, the symbolism of 1 Kings 18, man stands for month, prophet stands for day. So 450 prophets is 450 days, and a man is a month. And it actually says, do not let a man of them escape. We're going to take this like a Times crossword cryptically. So 1 month of the 450 days, 30 days of it, there'll be no escape for the man. But there's 450 days of seizing, 420 days of which provide an escape, and 30 days of which do not. That is an interpretation, a prophet for a day and a man for a month. Of course, in the reality, a prophet was a man, but it's a symbol. It's a word symbolism. So if you use a different word to describe the same character in a story, then the greater symbolic meaning can have a different symbolic meaning for that word that describes the same character. 2 words, prophet and man describing the same guy, but different symbolic meanings. So the 450 days, so we know that for 20 days until the end of escape. The end of escape is into Zoa, into the final true church. And so the harvest, the final ingathering, you would expect it to end on Tishri 21. And had it done that, then the fire sign would have been 420 days before then, which was Ab 21, which was last week. It wasn't, because we omitted to bring into this the famous celebration of booths by Solomon, where he celebrated booths for 14 days rather than the festival of booths, which is the final ingathering festival, the harvest festival to Christians. He celebrated that for 14 days, not 7. So there is a precedent for continuing to harvest for an extra 7 days. So the harvest would end Tishri 28, and 420 days before that is Ab 28. So that is when we'd start seizing the prophets of Baal, and you seize them after the fire has come from the heavens, which we have Ab 26 to Ab 28. The fire, the attendant says on the 7th doesn't say the seventh what, that, oh look, there's a cloud coming from the sea, a rising mushroom cloud like a man's palm. And that's the Sabbath, so the 7th. The Ab 27 is the Sabbath. So that's this Sabbath coming, that's August 1415, the Sabbath. And this is VJ Day, basically. I mean, I don't know, the Bible doesn't, as far as we know, mention VJ Day, but from a secular standpoint, VJ Day would seem to be, kind of twisted logic, a day that you might say there would be a nuclear terrorist attack. So from a secular standpoint, you could possibly say there was some logic in that date. But we don't deduce it from that. But it happened that this present thing that we deduce from the scriptures happened to fall on VJ Day, where actually there's been an ISIS terrorist threat on the Queen, apparently, according to the newspapers. What the purpose of that kind of publicity or such a... I don't understand secular stuff, it drives me mad. Difficult enough to understand the Bible. So that's one way we deduce it. Another way is the story of Jericho. In Jericho, there's a greater Jericho, where you go around this city 7 times, and in the 7th time, for 7 days, once. For 6 days you go around once, and on the 7th day of the campaign you go around 7 times. This is a Pentecostal pattern. You define a Sabbath by getting to the 7th day, you go around 7 times on a Sabbath, that's 7 Sabbaths. 7 Sabbaths is the Festival of Weeks, and then you get the Pentecost. So it's a Pentecostal type battle. Now 1 Kings 18 is Pentecostal, everything is denominated in 50s. 2 Kings 1 is Pentecostal with fire coming from the heavens, consuming a 50 and a chief of a 50. So these are all related. But the way we fulfill Jericho, which is, again, we see as a battle between the Lord's Witnesses and the Jehovah's Witnesses, who were the 3rd true church. We're the 4th true church in our understanding. We're not proving that in this talk, I'm just asserting it, sorry. Is that we discovered, actually, Jericho is actually Laodicea, and Laodicea, the 7th congregation of Revelation 3, is actually a sect within the Jehovah's Witnesses of people who think that the Lord's Witnesses have it right, but don't have the courage to come and join us because they're scared of the shunning that the Watchtower do when you leave. They're scared their life will be destroyed by a misinterpretation of Scripture, which just happens to suit a control freak Watchtower organisation. So anyway, Laodicea is sort of Lord's Witnesses who believe the 4th true Christian church, but haven't yet, well, they've made an agreement not to leave the Watchtower until we get a sign right, as I understand it. We don't know any of this physically. It's all deduced from the Scriptures. I've never met or spoken to anybody from Laodicea knowingly, although I have had emissaries from the Watchtower come and see me, but they've never said, hey, I'm a Laodicean. And I've spoken to members of a member of the governing body, but he wasn't a Laodicean, as far as I know. We identified Laodicea and realised there was this group in the Watchtower. We realised what the 7th congregation of Revelation stood for. It's a sect of Lord's Witnesses in the Watchtower. We realised that on Chislev the 6th, 2008. So then we arrived at Jericho. You can't attack a city until you arrive there. So we arrived interpretationally at Jericho on Chislev 6, and since Jericho means Moon City, we started the campaign on the 1st of the next month, the new moon, synchronizing it to the moon, Moon City. So Tebeth 1, 2008 is when it started. You take a campaign day for a year, that takes you to Tebeth 1, 2014. So the 7th campaign day is Tebeth 1, 2014 to Tebeth 1, 2015. You then go round 7 whole times, which are 7 whole months in the 7th campaign day, which is that year I've just described. So that will be Tebeth 1, will take you to Shabbat 1, Adar 1, Nisan 1, Iyar 1, Sivan 1, Tammuz 1, Ab 1, and then before the 8th time, because you don't go around 8 times, only 7, so it's 7 plus change. So before Elul 1, 2008, the campaign's over. In other words, there's been a fire sign and things are happening and the wall's falling down. So we've, you know, today as I do this video is, what are we, Wednesday, August the 12th, which is ab 25, I suppose. So level 1, it's in 6 days' time. This game has to be over in 6 days' time if that interpretation of the Jericho battle is correct. So, and there's only one Sabbath between now and then, which is ab 27. So that's when we would expect, well, between the 26th and the 28th, we expect this sign to occur. Thank you.